Detective Thaddeus Blackwood's mind the moment he saw the photograph taped to the precinct bulletin board. 5 faces, staring back at him with hollow eyes. Their missing person flyers yellowed and curling at the edges. Xerxes Chen, the desk sergeant, had barely glanced up when Blackwood asked about them. Those? Been up there for months. Maybe years, Chen had muttered, shuffling through paperwork. Nobody much cared to look. Nobody cared. The phrase haunted Blackwood as he studied the face of Zephydia Voss. 23. Last seen leaving a diner on Route 27. Lirelei Kane, 19, vanished from a gas station parking lot. Seraphine Drex, 25, disappeared after her shift at a local cannery. Minerva Thorne, 21, gone without a trace from her apartment complex. And Cordelia Ash, 24, who never made it home from a late-night grocery run. 5 women, 5 lives. 5 families who had filed reports, made desperate phone calls, and pleaded with anyone who would listen. But these weren't the daughters of senators or wives of wealthy businessmen. They were working-class women from the forgotten corners of Long Island, the kind of people society trained itself not to see. Blackwood's fingers traced the edge of Zephyria's photo. The young woman's eyes held a defiance that spoke to him. A stubborn fire that reminded him why he'd become a detective in the first place. Unlike his colleagues who chased high-profile cases and media attention, Blackwood had always been drawn to the overlooked, the discarded, the voices that whispered rather than screamed. The precinct buzzed with activity around him, but none of it concerned these 5 women. Officers discussed weekend plans, complained about traffic citations, and gossiped about promotions. Meanwhile, 5 families went to bed each night wondering if their daughters were still breathing. Blackwood pulled down Zephyria's flyer and walked to his desk. The case files were thin, embarrassingly so. Each investigation had been cursory at best, abandoned when initial leads dried up. The reports read like form letters, no signs of foul play. Subject likely left voluntarily. Case suspended, pending new evidence. But something nagged at him as he spread the files across his desk. The women had vanished over a span of 18 months, all from the same general area stretch of industrial Long Island, where oil refineries competed with strip malls for space, where the American dream came to rust and fade. They had different backgrounds, different social circles, different routines. Yet they shared something beyond their disappearances. Blackwood opened his laptop and began cross-referencing the locations where each woman was last seen. A pattern emerged like a constellation forming in the night sky. The gas station where Lirelei vanished was 3 miles from the diner where Zephyria was last spotted. Seraphine's cannery sat less than 2 miles from Minerva's apartment complex. Cordelia's grocery store anchored the center of it all. Someone had been hunting in that neighborhood, selecting victims with the methodical patience of a predator who understood that society's indifference was his greatest weapon. These women could disappear because they were already invisible to those in power. As darkness settled over the precinct, Blackwood made a silent promise to the 5 faces watching him from their scattered photographs. Their stories would be heard, their killer would be found, and their families would finally know the truth. No matter how long it took, or how many people he had to fight to get it. He walked through Gilgo Beach for 3 years, but he'd never seen the gulls circling with such aggressive intensity. The birds dove and wheeled above the dunes like vultures, their harsh cries cutting through the October wind. Something was wrong. His German shepherd, Ajax, strained against the leash, nose twitching as he caught a scent that made his hackles rise. Jung-hoon followed reluctantly, his morning jog forgotten as dread settled in his stomach like cold lead. The smell hit him first, sweet and putrid, unmistakable to anyone who'd ever encountered death. He covered his nose with his sleeve and pushed through the seagrass, Ajax whimpering beside him. What he found would haunt his dreams for years to come. A woman's body lay partially buried in the sandy soil, her dark hair tangled with debris and salt. The elements had been cruel, but Jung-hoon could still make out delicate features. A small scar above her left eyebrow, painted fingernails now chipped and dirty. She wore the remnants of a waitress uniform, black pants, and a white shirt that had once been crisp and clean. Jung-hoon's hands shook as he fumbled for his phone. Ajax's nervous barking echoing across the dunes. Within minutes, the peaceful morning was shattered by sirens and flashing lights. Police cars, ambulances, and crime scene technicians descended on the beach like an invasion force. Detective Blackwood arrived as the coroner's team was photographing the scene. He recognized her immediately from the faded flyer still tucked in his jacket pocket. Zephyria Voss, the 23-year-old waitress who'd vanished 8 months ago from the diner on Route 27. Her family had called the precinct every week for the first 3 months, then every month. Then they'd finally given up hope of official help. Dr. Minjun Reeves, the county medical examiner, knelt beside the body with practiced efficiency. His initial examination revealed what Blackwood had feared: this was no accidental death or suicide. Ligature marks around her wrists suggested she'd been bound. The positioning of the body indicated it had been moved after death and carefully concealed. "She's been here a while," Minjun said quietly, his voice barely audible above the wind. "Months, possibly. The cold weather and sand helped preserve what we're seeing, but I'll need to get her back to the lab for a proper examination." Blackwood studied the surrounding area, noting the isolation of the spot. Whoever had brought Zephyria here knew the area well, understood the patterns of foot traffic and police patrols. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. It was calculated, methodical. As crime scene photographer, Seoyeon Park documented every inch of the burial site. Blackwood felt a familiar burning in his chest. The media vultures would descend. Now that there was a body, a concrete story, to sell newspapers and generate ratings. Suddenly, everyone would care about Zephyria Voss. Where had they been when she was still alive and could have been saved? Captain Zarkonian arrived just as the body was being loaded into the coroner's van. The grizzled veteran surveyed the scene with the calculating eyes of someone who'd seen too many crime scenes and buried too many cases for political convenience. "This is going to be big, Blackwood," Zarkonian said, lighting a cigarette despite the wind. "Media is already sniffing around. Commissioner's going to want answers fast." Blackwood nodded, but his attention was focused on the churned sand where Zephyria had been found. If she was here, what about the other 4? Were Lirile, Seraphine, Minerva, and Cordelia buried somewhere nearby, their own families still waiting for answers that might never come? "I want to expand the search," Blackwood said. "Bring in ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, whatever it takes. If there's one body here, there might be others." The captain's expression darkened. "That's expensive, and we don't have confirmation. We have 5 missing women from the same area," Blackwood interrupted. "Now we have 1 body. The math isn't complicated." As the crime scene teams packed up their equipment and the beach returned to its natural quiet, Blackwood remained standing where Zephyria had been found. The discovery had changed everything, transformed what law enforcement had dismissed as isolated disappearances into something far more sinister. But he knew that finding her body was only the beginning. The real work, finding her killer and uncovering the truth about the other 4 women, was just starting. News vans lined the precinct parking lot like predatory birds, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky while reporters practiced their opening lines. The discovery of Zephyria Voss had suddenly made Long Island's forgotten women front-page news. Detective Blackwood slipped through the precinct's back entrance, avoiding the cameras and microphones. He'd spent the night poring over the case files, and what he'd discovered made his blood run cold. The connections he'd missed before now seemed glaringly obvious. Dr. Minjun Reeves was already waiting in the conference room, his preliminary autopsy report spread across the table like accusations. The medical examiner's usually steady hands showed slight tremors. Whatever he'd found had shaken him. Zafria didn't die where we found her, Minjun began without preamble. The pattern of lividity indicates she was moved several hours after death. But that's not the worst of it. He opened a manila folder revealing close-up photographs that made Blackwood's stomach turn. She was held captive for an extended period. The ligature marks showed different stages of healing, suggesting weeks or possibly months of captivity. Blackwood studied the images, each one revealing new evidence of prolonged torture, time of death. Based on decomposition and environmental factors, I'd estimate she died approximately 6 months ago. But Thaddeus, ... Minjun's voice dropped to a whisper. The way she was killed, the methodical nature of the injuries. This wasn't someone's first time. The conference room door opened, and Officer Zircon Williams entered, carrying a steaming cup of coffee and a grim expression. The rookie had been assigned to help with the expanding investigation, and his fresh eyes had already proven valuable. I've been mapping the last known locations of all 5 women, Zircon said, spreading a detailed street map across the table. Look at this. Red pins marked where each woman had vanished, forming a loose circle around a central point. At the center sat an abandoned industrial complex, the old Meridian processing plant that had closed 3 years earlier after environmental violations. The plant's been empty since 2022, Zircon continued. Perfect place to hold someone without being detected. And look at these employment records I pulled. He handed Blackwood a stack of personnel files. Guess who worked there until the day it shut down? Blackwood flipped through the files until he found the one that made his blood freeze. Thane Murdoch, 38, former security supervisor at Meridian Processing. The photograph showed a lean man, with pale eyes and a thin mouth, unremarkable, except for an intensity that seemed to burn through the camera lens. Where is he now? Blackwood asked. That's the problem, Zircon replied. According to unemployment records, he's been collecting benefits and living at 47 Desolation Avenue. But when I drove by this morning, the house has been empty for months. Neighbors say he moved out right around the time the plant closed. Blackwood felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with sickening clarity. Murdoch had lost his job when the plant shut down, knew the facility's layout intimately, and had intimate knowledge of the surrounding neighborhood where all 5 women had vanished. But proving it would require finding evidence, and evidence required finding Murdoch. Captain Zarkonian burst into the conference room, his face flushed with anger and political pressure. The commissioner wants updates every hour. The mayor's breathing down his neck, and the governor's office is asking questions. We need an arrest, and we need it fast. We need more than speed, Blackwood replied evenly. We need to do this right. If Murdoch killed Zephyria, he likely killed the others too. But if we rush and make mistakes, he walks free, and those families never get justice. The captain's jaw worked silently as he weighed politics against police work. Finally, he nodded. What do you need? Surveillance on any property connected to Murdoch family, friends, former co-workers, cadaver dogs at the processing plant, and a forensic accounting team to trace his movements since the plant closure. Blackwood stood, his resolve hardening. This bastard thought he could prey on women society had forgotten. Time to show him he was wrong. As the team dispersed to their assignments, Blackwood remained in the conference room, staring at Murdoch's photograph. The man's eyes seemed to follow him, holding secrets about 4 women who might still be alive somewhere, held captive in whatever hellhole Murdoch had created. The race to find the remaining women had begun. But Blackwood knew they weren't just racing against time. They were racing against a killer who'd had months to perfect his methods and cover his tracks. Loomed against the gray morning sky like a monument to industrial decay. Blackwood stood at the perimeter fence, watching as Officer Zircon Williams directed the cadaver dog teams through gaps in the rusted barriers. The German shepherds moved with purpose through the overgrown parking lot, their handlers following with grim determination. Detective Sarah Henley approached from the east side of the complex, her radio crackling with updates from the surveillance teams. She'd been Blackwood's partner for 2 years, and her methodical approach complemented his intuitive leaps perfectly. Still no sign of Murdoch at any of the known addresses, Sarah reported. But I found something interesting in the employment records. He wasn't just security. He was specifically assigned to the waste management section that gave him access to the entire underground tunnel system. Blackwood felt his pulse quicken. The plant's underground network had been designed to transport chemical waste to storage tanks. But those tunnels could easily hide evidence or prisoners. A sharp bark echoed from the main building, followed by excited voices from the handler. Team Rex, the lead cadaver dog, had gone rigid near what appeared to be an innocuous maintenance shed. His handler, Canine Officer Jung-Hoon Valdez, the same man who'd discovered Zephyria's body, knelt beside the animal with practiced efficiency. "We've got something here," Jung-Hoon called out, his voice carrying across the abandoned complex. "Rex is indicating decomposition, but it's not surface level. Whatever he's detecting is underground." Within minutes, the crime scene technicians had assembled around the shed. What they found beneath a layer of concrete and debris was an access hatch leading to the plant's tunnel system. The metal cover bore fresh tool marks, suggesting recent use despite the plant's years of abandonment. Blackwood descended first, his flashlight cutting through darkness that seemed almost alive. The tunnels stretched in multiple directions, their walls slick with moisture, and something else dark stains that made his skin crawl. The air carried odors that no amount of training could prepare someone for. 20 feet from the access point, they found the first room. It had been converted into a makeshift prison cell, chains bolted to concrete walls, a mattress stained with substances Blackwood didn't want to identify, and scratches in the stone where fingernails had clawed desperately for freedom. But most disturbing were the personal items scattered around. The spacer wallet belonging to Lirelei Kane, a bracelet that matched the description of one worn by Minerva Thorne. "Jesus Christ," Sarah whispered, her flashlight illuminating what appeared to be a feeding schedule written in pencil on the wall. Names, dates, times, a methodical record of captivity that stretched back over a year. Crime scene photographer SCO Eon Park moved through the space with professional detachment, but Blackwood could see the way her hands shook slightly as she documented each piece of evidence. This wasn't just a crime scene, it was a glimpse into systematic evil. "There are more rooms," Zircon's voice echoed from deeper in the tunnel system. "At least 3 more that I can see, and they're all showing signs of recent use." Blackwood's radio crackled to life. Captain Zarkonian's voice was tight with urgency. "Blackwood, we've got a situation. Murdoch's credit card was used at a gas station 12 miles from your location 30 minutes ago. Surveillance shows him purchasing rope, bleach, and plastic sheeting." The implications hit Blackwood like a physical blow. Murdoch wasn't just covering his tracks, he was preparing to dispose of evidence. And if any of the missing women were still alive, they were running out of time. "Sarah, stay here with the crime scene team," Blackwood ordered. "Zircon, you're with me. We need to intercept Murdoch before he can destroy whatever evidence remains." As they raced through the tunnels toward the surface, Blackwood's mind calculated distances and timing. The gas station was 20 minutes away by car, but Murdoch had a significant head start. Worse, they still didn't know where he was holding. The women, if any, were still alive, emerging into daylight. Blackwood squinted against the sun's glare as patrol cars converged on their location. The manhunt was expanding, but they were chasing shadows and racing against a killer who'd had months to plan his endgame. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You found my workshop. Impressive. But you'll never find them in time, TM." Murdoch was watching them, taunting them, confident that his game would end on his terms. But Blackwood had spent his career finding what others had given up for lost. The missing women weren't just cases to him, they were daughters, sisters, friends who deserved to come home. The race against time had become personal, and Blackwood was determined that this time, the forgotten wouldn't stay lost forever. Desolation Avenue looked like every other property in the decaying neighborhood, broken windows covered with plywood, an overgrown yard, and the general air of resignation that poverty brings. But Detective Blackwood knew that appearances could be devastating lies. The SWAT team had surrounded the property at dawn, but their forced entry revealed only empty rooms and the lingering scent of bleach. However, crime scene technician, as Parks keen eye had spotted something the initial search had missed: fresh scratches around the basement door lock and faint drag marks on the floor leading downward. He's been using this place more recently than we thought, COIN observed, photographing the evidence with methodical precision. These marks are maybe days old, not months. In the basement, they found Murdoch's real workshop. Unlike the holding cells at the processing plant, this space was devoted to planning and surveillance. Corkboards covered every wall, displaying photographs of dozens of women, not just the 5 missing cases, but others spanning several years. String-connected photos to addresses, work schedules, daily routines. It was a predator's map of potential. Victims Officer Zircon Williams stood frozen before one particular board, his face pale with recognition. "Blackwood, you need to see this." His voice was barely above a whisper. The central board contained detailed surveillance photos of the 5 missing women: Lirelei, Seraphine, Minerva, and Cordelia, but also included images of Detective Sarah Henley entering and leaving the precinct, getting coffee, walking to her car. Red string connected Sarah's photos to a note written in Murdoch's careful handwriting. Final phase, the detective. Blackwood's blood turned to ice as he reached for his radio. Sarah hadn't answered her last 2 check-ins, and he'd assumed she was still processing the tunnel crime scenes. But the timestamp on Murdoch's photos showed he'd been following her movements for weeks. "All units, locate Detective Henley immediately," Blackwood barked into his radio. "Consider her in extreme danger, and treat any contact with suspect Thane Murdoch as potentially lethal." Captain Zarkonian's voice crackled back through the radio. "Her vehicle GPS shows her last known position, at the old Meridian plant, but the signal went dead 40 minutes ago. We're sending backup to your location now." Jung-Hoon Valdez, the K-29 officer whose dog had discovered Zephyria's body, entered the basement with his German Shepherd Rex. The dog immediately began alerting on a corner of the room where Murdoch had apparently stored clothing and personal items from his victims. But Rex's behavior suggested something else: fresh scent trails, leading from the basement toward the back of the house. "He was here recently," Jung-Hoon confirmed. "Rex is picking up multiple scents, including one that doesn't match the victim's items. Could be your partner." Blackwood's mind raced through the implications. Murdoch had been watching the investigation unfold, probably anticipated their discovery of his workshop, and had prepared accordingly. Taking Sarah wasn't random. It was a calculated move to draw the police into his final game. His phone buzzed with another message. "Basement workshop was impressive. Wait until you see my masterpiece. You have 2 hours to find Detective Henley and the others before I complete my collection. No police, no backup. Just you. Meridian plant, sublevel 3. Come alone, or they all die." TM Zircon grabbed Blackwood's arm as he headed toward the basement stairs. "You can't go alone. It's obviously a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Blackwood replied grimly. "But Sarah's down there with God knows how many other women who've been written off by everyone except their families. I didn't become a cop to abandon people when the odds got bad." Captain Zarkonian's voice cut through their debate via radio. "Blackwood, we're mobilizing a full tactical response. Give us 30 minutes to coordinate." "We don't have 30 minutes," Blackwood interrupted. "Murdoch's been planning this for months, maybe years. He knows exactly how long it takes to organize a tactical response, and he's counting on us following protocol while he disposes of the evidence. As Blackwood prepared to leave, Coione handed him a small device, a GPS tracker disguised as a pen. If you're going in alone, at least let us know where you are when things go wrong. The drive to Meridian processing plant took 12 minutes through increasingly empty industrial streets. Blackwood parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, every shadow potentially hiding Murdoch's surveillance or an ambush. The abandoned facility looked different now, more menacing, as if the building itself had absorbed the evil that had occurred within its walls. The entrance to Sublevel 3 was hidden behind what appeared to be a maintenance panel, exactly the kind of detail someone with Murdoch's security background would know intimately. As Blackwood descended into darkness, following his flashlight beam deeper into the earth, he could hear sounds that made his skin crawl, muffled voices, the rattle of chains, and something that might have been crying. Sarah and the missing women were down there somewhere, trapped in Murdoch's vision of perfect control. But Blackwood was no longer just hunting a killer. He was walking directly into the web of a predator who'd been preparing for this confrontation since the day his first victim had vanished. The real hunt was about to begin. Processing stretched like arteries through the earth, each passage leading deeper into Thane Murdoch's kingdom of horrors. Detective Blackwood moved cautiously through the darkness, his flashlight creating dancing shadows that seemed to mock his efforts to find the missing women. The sound reached him first, Sarah's voice, strained but defiant, echoing from somewhere ahead. She was alive, and more importantly, she was fighting back. That gave Blackwood hope, even as the overwhelming stench of decay and human suffering made his stomach revolt. "I know you're here." Detective Murdoch's voice drifted through the tunnels, like poison gas. "Welcome to my gallery. I've been preparing for this moment since you first pulled down Zephyria's missing person flyer." Blackwood followed the voice deeper into the complex, past rooms that revealed the full scope of Murdoch's systematic evil. In one chamber, he found evidence of at least a dozen victims spanning several years, women whose disappearances had been dismissed, forgotten, or attributed to the natural migration patterns of a transient population. The main chamber opened before him like a vision from hell. Sarah was chained to a support beam, her face bloodied but her eyes blazing with fury. Around her, 4 other women sat in makeshift cells: Lorelei, Seraphine, Minerva, and Cordelia, the missing women whose families had never stopped hoping. They were alive, emaciated, traumatized, but alive. Beautiful, isn't it? Murdoch emerged from the shadows, no longer the unremarkable man from his employment photo. Months of living underground had transformed him into something feral, his pale eyes reflecting Blackwood's flashlight like an animal caught in headlights. "Society throws these women away like garbage, but I gave them purpose. I made them important by torturing them." Blackwood kept his gun trained on Murdoch while scanning for tactical advantages. "By turning them into your personal collection, by making them matter," Murdoch hissed. "Do you know how many missing person reports get filed every year in this county? Thousands. But you only care when there's a body, when there's media attention, when there's political pressure. I showed you what you really aren't: different predators wearing badges." Blackwood inched closer, noting the complex system of restraints and booby traps Murdoch had rigged throughout the chamber. The killer had been preparing for this confrontation, but his arrogance had led him to make one crucial mistake. He'd assumed Blackwood would come alone. "You're right about one thing," Blackwood said, drawing Murdoch's attention. "The system failed these women, but you're not their savior. You're the worst thing that ever happened to them." Officer Zircon Williams appeared silently in the tunnel entrance behind Murdoch, moving with the careful precision of someone who understood that lives hung in the balance. Jung-Hoon Valdez and his dog Rex flanked from the opposite side. Having followed scent trails through the complex tunnel system, Murdoch sensed the change in dynamics and spun toward the movement. But Blackwood was already moving. Years of training kicked in as he tackled Murdoch, sending both men crashing into the chamber's makeshift furniture. The killer was stronger than expected, driven by the desperate fury of someone whose carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. The fight was brutal and desperate. Murdoch produced a knife from somewhere, slashing wildly as they rolled across the concrete floor. Blackwood felt the blade slice across his ribs, but managed to pin Murdoch's wrist, smashing it against the ground until the weapon clattered away. "It's over, Murdoch," Blackwood gasped, blood seeping through his shirt as he held the killer face down on the cold concrete. "These women are going home." The rescue operation took 3 hours. EMTs worked to stabilize for women who'd survived months of captivity, while crime scene technicians documented evidence that would ensure Murdoch never saw freedom again. Detective Sarah Henley refused medical treatment until all the victims had been loaded into ambulances, her dedication to duty intact despite her ordeal. Captain Zarkonian arrived as Murdoch was being loaded into a police transport, the killer's pale eyes still burning with unrepentant hatred. "How many more are there?" the captain asked quietly. "At least 12 confirmed victims, based on the evidence we've found," Blackwood replied, watching as Jung-hoon comforted Cordelia, the youngest survivor. "Maybe more. It'll take months to process everything he collected down there." The media circus that followed was inevitable, but different this time. Instead of focusing solely on the killer's psychology or the investigation's dramatic conclusion, reporters found themselves drawn to the stories of survival. Leroy Kane spoke about her determination to live for her younger brother, Seraphine. Drex described the way the women had supported each other through their darkest moments. Minerva Thorne and Cordelia Ashe became advocates for missing person investigations, ensuring their ordeal would prevent others. 6 months later, Detective Blackwood stood in the same precinct where he'd first noticed the yellowed missing person flyers. The bulletin board now held commendations, thank you letters from families, and photographs of the survivors rebuilding their lives. But it also displayed new missing person reports, faces of other forgotten people who needed someone to care enough to look. Officer Zircon Williams approached with a fresh case file. "Another missing person from the east side," he said quietly. 20-year-old woman named Callista Vex disappeared 3 days ago after leaving work at a textile factory. Blackwood took the file and studied Callista's photograph. Another young woman from society's margins, another family desperate for answers, another case that might be dismissed as unimportant by those who decided which lives mattered. "Well," he said, pinning Callista's photo to the board with the same careful attention he'd given to Zephyria Voss months earlier, "let's make sure someone cares." The work of finding the lost would never end, but Blackwood had learned that sometimes one person's determination to see the invisible could light a fire that burned away society's indifference. In a world that trained itself not to notice the disappeared, he would keep looking until every missing person found their way home. The forgotten would be forgotten no more.